But let me introduce our newsmaker this evening. Well, Harshvardhan Shringla is now joining us, former Foreign Secretary. Thanks very much, sir, for being with us on NDTV. Well, my first question to you, how crucial do you think this visit is? Because this is not just a bilateral visit, but it's also a multilateral visit, given the fact that you have the Quad Summit as well. The Prime Minister will make that address at the UN. So, you know, a lot to unpack, a lot to decode, a lot to watch out for.
Well, NDTV has called it an action-packed visit, and I agree. It's got all the elements of bilateral, plurilateral, that's the Quad, multilateral, that's the UN, and of course the diaspora, which is very critical in the US. This is Prime Minister Modi's 9th visit to the US in the 10 years that he has held this post. But it is a very significant visit because this is the first that he's undertaking to the US in his 3rd term of office. It's also the last visit that he would make with President Biden at the helm. It is important at this point of time to take stock of where the relationship is and to look at what can come, in the months and years ahead. And that's important because if Vice President Kamala Harris becomes president, there is a general expectation that there would be continuity in the relationship. So I think that's important from that context. It's also important from the point of view of global peace and security, because the Prime Minister is very likely to keep President Biden informed about his recent visits both to Russia and the Ukraine, during which he had a fair amount of one-to-one FaceTime with Presidents Putin and Zelensky. And I think interfacing on this with the US is critical because US is a major factor in the overall situation, and I think it's important to align one's positions as much as possible, especially in our endeavor to promote peace, which is backed up not just by our desire, but by countries across the global south. There's a strong, I think, sense that there should be an end to conflicts which impact so adversely on countries across the world.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, I think that what you spoke about peace and looking for a peace solution, I think that's an extremely important aspect. But, you know, you made an interesting point that there's going to be continuity, no matter who takes over as president. I think we have sort of come to a place where India and the US, I mean, it's being described as a partnership for the future. And there is a lot of business that has been done in the Biden years. I mean, initially there was this sort of skepticism, but I think we've come a long way given the fact that there have been so many pacts that have been inked, so many agreements that have been signed, whether it's the semiconductor push, defense, research, innovation. So I think we're in that position where it's only going to grow from here, even though there's a change of guard in the offing.
Well, we are in a good place, as you said, because, we have the relationship enjoys strong support across the political aisle in Washington, D.C. In other words, we have bipartisan support from Republicans and Democrats. Prime Minister Modi had a very good connect with President Trump. He has a very good connect with President Biden. We worked very well under the Republicans and the Democrats in furthering that very important, comprehensive strategic partnership. And clearly, irrespective of who becomes president, whether it is Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, I think that relationship is going to move ahead. We've made enormous progress in the past decade or so. And I think the momentum that is there is going to carry us forward. And Prime Minister Modi's visit in that context is very, very critical in providing an impetus to the relationship that would go beyond the current visit, because India will host the next Quad Summit in New Delhi or in India. And we will be welcoming the new US President and a new Japanese Prime Minister to India. And I think that's where we can continue and keep the ball rolling in terms of both the bilateral relationship and the significant achievements that have been chalked up under the Quad framework.
In fact, looking at the Quad formation, as a diplomat, Mr. Shringla, you've seen it very, very closely. And Quad has emerged as an extremely strong multilateral organization, whether it comes to security, defense, or geopolitics. How do you see Quad now more important than ever before, given the fact that there is the China challenge that needs to be looked at, the larger Indo-Pacific strategy, also India as a voice of the global South? How is the Quad important for India and also in the larger context of regional stability?
The Quad is essentially a partner to ensure that the vision of a free, open, transparent, inclusive, and rules-based international order is maintained in the Indo-Pacific region. In that context, I think India has been very keen to ensure that the focus on the Indo-Pacific is maintained. It is not distracted by conflicts in Europe and the Middle East. President Biden did hold a virtual summit soon after the Ukraine conflict broke out to reassure Quad partners that we would not be distracted and that the focus would continue to be on the Indo-Pacific. So the Quad serves the purpose of bringing these four countries together on our quest for a vision for the Indo-Pacific. And from that point of view, I think a fair amount, as you said, has been done across the board, because the Quad is not a military construct. It is basically, a framework that promotes cooperation within the Indo-Pacific region that enables us to realize the vision, as I said, of a free, open, transparent Indo-Pacific region. So from that, I think a fair amount of work has been done, and this visit, I think, will provide the necessary impetus, whether it is in ensuring that the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness or Maritime Security is expanded to include, say, satellite sharing and other data between us and our Southeast Asian partners, or the involvement of the Coast Guard in the Indo-Pacific domain, sort of jointly working together to involve the Coast Guards of all of our countries. Essentially, there will be some significant, I would say, both the review and progress in the relationship. And then we will have to bring it to India, where I think we will look at the next important steps under the Quad.
That's right, Mr. Shringla, and also looking at a lasting peace solution. I think that's so important, given the fact that there's a war in Gaza, and of course what's happening in Russia and Ukraine as well. Many would describe it as a war that the world seems to have lost interest in, but it's still killing people. It's still causing a lot of damage and devastation. So how do you see India well placed in terms of brokering a lasting peace solution, and how important is the US in that for India and the rest of the partners in the Quad as well?
So Prime Minister Modi's visit both to Russia and to Ukraine have to be seen as a part of our desire to achieve lasting peace, as you say, in Europe and in the Ukraine conflict. He's backed up not only by our I would say sensibilities here, but also by what the rest of the global South is telling us. I think there is a widespread view among the developing countries that there has to be an end to conflict, and what Prime Minister Modi is doing is using his goodwill and good offices to work with the protagonists concerned to try and bring them to some form of sitting down together and negotiating an end to the conflict. Of course, this is a very preliminary exercise. It's testing the waters. But the fact of the matter is that this time there are very few statesmen at a global level who have the stature to be able to go to both President Putin and President Zelensky and to be able to talk to them about peace. And of course, speaking to President Biden, President of the United States in this context is very, very important. Because as I said, the United States is a preponderant global power.
Yes.
It's also very involved in this particular conflict, and not having them on board is really half the work done. So I think Prime Minister Modi's interactions with President Biden will focus on this issue. They will spend some quality time in discussing both what transpired in Prime Minister Modi's meetings with the two leaders, but also in how one can proceed further ahead in this endeavor.
I think that's an important point you're making. There is a lot of common ground. There are shared values between India and the US, and we have come a long way. But there are challenges as well, Mr. Shringla. I mean, the Pannun issue, which is extremely unfortunate, and in fact, news also came of the White House hosting some pro-Khalistan leaders. So, the Khalistan issue, however, is something that both India and US have vowed to discuss across the table. But do you see this as a major challenge?
I think the India-US relationship today transcends many of the smaller issues that could come up. If you recall that when the conflict, Ukraine conflict, first broke out, and our positions were not the same as with the United States, President Biden specially convened a meeting of the Quad leaders, a virtual meeting, in which he said, we understand where India is coming from. We understand India's position on this issue. And I want to assure all the Quad leaders that our focus will continue to be on the Indo-Pacific. What he was doing basically is to say that our relationship with India is more important than some of these issues that may come up. Some of these irritants and differences in approaches that may come up. Someone also mentioned that over the last 25 years, the relationship has matured adequately as two democracies, as two countries with shared values and principles, that we can take in stride some of the differences, both in approach, policy, and nuance that come up in our relationship. So I would not give too much credence to the Pannun issue. I think it is an irritant, but it will certainly not be a factor in the discussions. It will not be a major factor in the discussions, and it will be something that I think the two leaders will spend very little time on.
Before I let you go, my last question, as a diplomat who has seen Prime Minister Modi's diplomacy so closely, do you think that we have, in a sense, transformed how diplomacy works? I mean, it's not just something that matters to the corridors of Hyderabad House. It's really about people-to-people connect. It's about, it's very much about the people of India. It's about how, the semiconductor plant, for example, is generating jobs for our citizens. So it's really about those people-to-people ties that are a crucial pillar and a cornerstone, perhaps, of the Prime Minister's diplomacy.
No, absolutely. I think Prime Minister's India First policy comes to the fore. Whatever we are looking at in terms of the program and schedule is linked to the ultimate issue of how does it benefit the person on the ground? How does the common man benefit from this? When he's meeting CEOs of cutting-edge technologies, whether it's AI, quantum computing, life sciences, biotechnology, he's looking at many of these companies investing in these areas in India, creating jobs, creating R&D facilities, and accommodating that talent pool that we have in India.
Absolutely.
When he's talking about the community, the Indian diaspora, we are trying to carry them forward in terms of what they can do for their, country of origin in terms of investments, technology, supporting startups, and so on and so forth. So there is everything as a rationale, and everything is linked at the end of the day to the benefit of the people of our country.